While in December 2017, the world was astonished when the US Department of Defense released a startling video of an encounter between a US Navy Boeing FA-18F Super Hornet and an unidentified flying object that reportedly occurred 13 years earlier on November 14, 2004, 140 miles southwest of San Diego, California. The encounter itself was precipitated by a series of unusual incidents recorded on radar by the US Navy guided missile cruiser USS Princeton over a 2-week period. Typically, the Princeton would detect the objects tumbling down from 80,000 feet to 20,000 feet, where they would suddenly stop, seemingly in mid-air. After hovering for sometimes hours, the objects would then race skyward again. As these incidents were only being observed on the Princeton's advanced radar system, the radar operators were eager to investigate them directly. And so, when one appeared again on November 17th, they wasted no time in vectoring in 2 FA-18F Super Hornets from the USS Nimitz. The Super Hornets themselves were airborne on a training flight, which was subsequently cancelled so they could be diverted towards the object. Flying one of the Super Hornets was Commander David Fravor, a pilot with nearly 16 years of military flying under his belt, and the commanding officer of the VF-41 Squadron, the Black Aces, aboard the USS Nimitz. Speaking to the New York Times in December 2017, Fravor said that the Princeton guided them towards an object they were tracking until they reached what is known as the merge point. This occurs when two objects are so close that a radar operator can no longer distinguish the two. In this case, the FA-18s and this unidentified object. At first, neither Commander Fravor nor his wingman, Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, could see the object that the Princeton had been tracking. Both aircraft were using their own onboard radars to scan the skies and aid them in their search. But it wasn't until he looked down to the sea that he found what he was looking for. The weather was good and the ocean was calm, but he noticed that waves were breaking over something that was just below the surface of the water. He also noticed that the waves were frothy and foamy, as though the water around the object was boiling. Although difficult to make out any details, he estimated the submerged object to be around the size of a Boeing 737, approximately 98 feet wide. He then noticed another object hovering 50 feet above the water over the position of the submerged object. He described it as an oval-shaped, white-coloured craft that he estimated to be 40 feet long, that he likened to a gigantic tic-tac. The craft was jumping around erratically over the underwater object, although he couldn't identify any method of propulsion or even means of flight. It had no wings or visible rotor system, indicating it wasn't a conventional aeroplane or helicopter. Nor did its movements appear to disrupt the water, as could be expected from a typical aircraft engine operating at that height. Only the submerged object appeared to have any effect on the otherwise calm sea. Understandably intrigued, Fravor told his wingman to stay high over the scene while he began a turning descent towards the two objects to get a closer look. As his aircraft descended, the flying objects became aware of Fravor's aircraft and began to rise upwards, mirroring Fravor's own turns as it did so. After several turns with one another, Fravor decided to break the turn and head directly for the object. He dipped the nose of his aircraft towards the ocean before pulling up underneath the object in a maneuver known in air combat as a low yo-yo. However, as his aircraft pulled up, the object accelerated away at incredible speed, with Fravor describing it as akin to a bullet leaving a gun. Unable to pursue, Fravor decided to turn back and take another look at the object under the water. However, it too had vanished by the time his aircraft had returned to the scene. Fravor reported back to the USS Princeton over the radio, and was instructed to proceed with his wingman to a point 60 miles away, where he could set up a combat air patrol, or CAP. As the two FA-18s proceeded to the designated point, Fravor was amazed when he received word from the radar operators on the Princeton that the object had reappeared in the actual spot the fighters had been instructed to head towards. When the FA-18s arrived, the object had once again disappeared. Aside from the way the flying object acted, a number of factors make this case especially intriguing. Firstly, the object was detected on the Princeton's radar long enough for 2 fighter aircraft to be vectored towards it. It was then viewed by the occupants of 2 separate aircraft, each with 2 crew members. Since both Fravor and Slide had weapons system officers sat in the back seat of their aircraft during the flight. Their visual observations are supported by infrared camera footage taken by the targeting systems carried on the FA-18s.
Dude, there's a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like that thing, it's rotating.
This helps cancel out the possibility that the radar operators on the Princeton were detecting atmospheric phenomena that created the impression of a solid object on their monitors. Fravor has said that other radars in the area did detect the object, including an E-2 Hawkeye airborne surveillance and monitor aircraft. Secondly, the object displayed intelligence and possibly even intent. When it became aware of Fravor's aircraft, it rose up to meet him. While it is possible whatever was controlling it was as curious of Fravor as he was of it, it's also possible it was taking up a defense posture to protect the larger, submerged object. As Fravor and the object turned with one another in the sky, the submerged object made good its escape, which could imply the flying object was trying to distract him. Finally, and perhaps most worryingly, the object knew where the FA-18s were heading. Assuming that it wasn't a coincidence that the object was in the spot the FA-18s were being sent to, it implies that at the very least, the object was monitoring US Navy communications between the aircraft and the USS Princeton. The encounter left a considerable impression on Fravor, despite the fact his aircraft was a relatively new type in US Navy service at the time. Fravor was far more impressed with the object, stating he would want to fly it himself. When he was contacted in 2017 by Luis Elizondo, Elizondo had once headed a $22 million Pentagon program known as the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, or AATIP, which investigated sightings of UFOs between 2007 and 2012. Elizondo has since joined the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science that aims to raise money for UFO research and encourages Fravor to go public with his story. As Fravor, the man himself, has said, "It was a real object, it existed and I saw it. Something not from Earth. I think the story needs to be told. We need to stop making jokes and start paying attention to it." Now take of that what you will, but it wasn't just reports from incredibly credible people. The footage proves that all of this happened, and the question is, should we all be asking a lot more questions?